Welcome to Legacy Engineered, the show where smart structure meets lasting success. Join Scott Arden, Chairman and CEO of Controllers Limited, as he sits down with business leaders, top entrepreneurs, and experts to uncover the strategies, stories, and structures that build lasting legacies. And now, here's your host, Scott Arden.
Welcome back to Legacy Engineer, the podcast where we explore the strategies, structures, and leadership decisions that create impact today and legacies that last for generations. I'm your host, Scott Arden. Today, I'm honored to welcome Jeffrey Hayzlett, Chairman of the C-Suite Network, a global community of top executives, founders, and thought leaders. Jeffrey is a bold voice in leadership, a former Fortune 100 CMO, best-selling author, media personality, and someone who tells it like it is when it comes to business, growth, and accountability. Jeffrey has spent decades working alongside CEOs and entrepreneurs, helping them cut through noise, scale with intention, and lead with purpose. His insights challenge conventional thinking and push leaders to ask more important questions, not just how big they're building, but why they're building it. Jeffrey, welcome to Legacy Engineered.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Scott.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on. Well, you and I have known each other for a few years now, part of the C-Suite Network, also part of Hero Club, the Finance Council, all that good stuff. And so I'm honored to have you here, man.
Man, you've dove right into the C-Suite Network pool, which is great, and you're getting the benefits of being a part of that community. And there's so many CEOs today who isolate themselves, and now everybody's now realizing if you isolate yourself, it's not as good as if you jump in with a bigger and better tribe and surround yourself with some other people that are like you so you can get those great ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually, it kind of leads into what I was going to ask you, but we'll get to that here in a second. So I thought I put my phone in D on D. Anywho.
The way it works.
Well, so anyway, I wanted to ask you, so you've worked with thousands of CEOs through the C-Suite Network. What separates leaders who build lasting companies for those who, or separates business leaders who build lasting companies from those who achieve just short-term success?
Mostly it's those that have values. I think people that kind of think through the values of their company, what is it they want to be, what do they want to be when they grow up? And also the second one is, Scott, they really thought through the problem they're solving. Not everybody, they just think, oh, this would be a great idea. Like a lot of people get into podcasting, but 38% of the people who start podcasting never make it past the first episode. 48% of those that are left never make it past the first year. But if you begin with the problem that you're trying to solve and really think that through, you're going to think about the highs, you're going to think about the lows, and you're going to understand what it really takes to build a business. And not everybody, has the fortitude, the energy, and quite frankly, the wallet to be able to do that. And so if you spend the time on thinking about what problem you're solving, you're going to be able to come out on the end.
Absolutely. That's awesome. That's very powerful, very powerful. So, many entrepreneurs focus on revenue and growth, but few focus on structure, culture, and continuity. Where do you see leaders getting this wrong most often?
Again, I think it gets back to those values. You're part of the Hero Club. It's a value-based group. It's the CEOs who think about and put people above profit. And so when we find out that you're grounded in some belief, something that's bigger than yourself, you're able to move forward. And we find that people who have that, they have employees who are more engaged when 53% of most employees in a company can't even tell you the mission statement for the business, right? That's a major issue. And we also find that those value-based leaders also gross more money than their competitors. They net more money than the competitors. They have vendors who want to do business with them. And, overall, they just are a lot nicer to be around. So all of those things are important. And I think if you're grounded like that, then you think about your culture. You think about, what's the cadence of my business? What do I want my team to feel like? How do I get my team to buy in? And a lot of other things that are very critical. And then there's going to be times in which your business is going to have some difficulties. Well, during those difficulties, if you're based on the values that you're trying to really perpetuate throughout your organization, that is that culture. Because Now, culture, is a tough thing to do, and it's developed over a period of time. You might say this is our culture, but the culture is you at that company, me at this company, Jessica at this company, all the different people that we might have that are part of the company make up the culture. But the other big thing I see businesses failing at is in mood. And that is, what is the mood of your company? I've
Mm,
been in companies that had great cultures, but the mood was off. I mean, great culture in terms of its history and the deep roots that it had. But at 5 minutes to five, I could be killed if I was standing by the back door as everybody rushed to get out to the parking lot to get home. So, so you have to be able to be thinking about that. And then early in this question, I said cadence. I love cadence. If you've ever watched the show West Wing, an old show years ago, you'd watch everybody in the West Wing and you walk in the background, people were rushing here, rushing there, rushing there. Well, of course, that was all fake. That was TV. Because if you've ever been in the
right.
White House, there's nobody rushing. Okay. I've been there many times and it's a very quiet, very deep place. Although not as quiet right now with who we got in there, but nonetheless, that's the
This
way
is
it is.
true.
But I'm sure, Scott, you stepped into a business and you could feel the energy
Oh,
or
yeah.
not feel the energy, right?
Right.
And that's to me the cadence of a business. And I think leaders have got to really focus on the cadence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that we build, it's all about the culture and having fun and, loving what you do within our company. You can add controllers and in generational wealth solutions, all that good stuff. So I 100% agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So, you're known for your direct, no BS approach to leadership. What hard truth do today's business owners most need to hear but often avoid?
Focus.
Yep.
Focus. I mean, you're in a race. You're in a race. COVID really shown this. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years. And, I look at it. There's a friend of mine who once said, he talked about his mother passed, his mother passed. And so he counted up the number of days how old she was. And she was in her 80s. And so at where he was, he counted the number of days between then and when she died, saying, hey, if I just lived to my mother's age, how many more days do I have? And
Right.
I thought that was very
Mm,
critical. And then he went out and got that many days in pennies and he put them in a jar. And then he got an equal jar right next to it. And every day he would take out a penny and look at the penny and then think about his day and then put it in the new jar because he wanted to make sure that every day was not sponge worthy like the Seinfeld episode, but penny worthy, right? In
right.
terms of making him reflect about that. And I think, if you really want to think about that, you have only so many days. You have only so much time. You have only so much revenue, so much money to be able to invest in the business, and so much this, so much of that, so much
Yep.
talent, right? Don't waste it, don't squander it, because you'll be looking back and realize you wasted a lot, you squandered a lot, you didn't take advantage, you didn't leverage, you didn't focus on the things that were really critical for you in order to succeed.
Mm, that's powerful. Not a lot of people think in that direction, and I think our listeners that'll be highly impactful for our listeners. Absolutely. That's awesome. So as companies scale, leadership, complexity increases. How should founders evolve personally to keep their businesses from outgrowing them?
Oh, well, that's a great question. We touched a little bit at the beginning, and I'm reading a lot more about the isolation of CEOs, where they're not getting out and getting with their peers. And, I've always been a believer in masterminds. Now, in the C-suite network, we call these councils, peer-to-peer councils based on the roles in the company. So all CEOs, all CMOs, CFOs, CSOs, CISOs, and so forth. And or you could do it by geography, or you could do it by industry, or you could do it by problems you're solving, but or by values like the Hero Club, but
Right.
getting together with people who are similar but different, right? Similar in terms of they have a core thing that brings them together, either their title, their geography, their revenue, or whatever it might be. But it's very critical that you have another, like, I don't know if I want to use the word tribe, a village, but a place in which you can go, Scott, to where you can throw ideas out and be vulnerable
Right.
and then learn and then get incremental, not just feedback. Listen, you don't want advice, you want counsel. Advice is what's given by people who never done it before. But you
Correct.
want counsel. You want me to be able to say, Scott, well, that's a great question. Here's how I did it. Now you get to see and you get to decide, yeah, ooh, wow, I would like to do it that way, or no, I don't want to do it that way, you
Right.
know? And it's in the no's, not so much as the yes, that helps to framework where you want to go, because I think most winners, quote Keanu Reeves from The Replacement, I thought was always a great movie. He goes, winners always want the ball.
Right.
Winners always want the ball. I know maybe Gene Hackman said that, and then Keanu maybe quoted him afterwards. But that's the kind of thing I think it's important for us to be able to have a group of people where you can walk in, take the armor off, at the door, and then have some in-depth discussions and get some gives, and you give some gives, and the more we give, the more we get in terms of the feedback and the direction that we want to go. And I think it's just really critical that you have that group. I want that group. I've got, lifelong friends, lifelong colleagues, that I would drop everything for tomorrow if they needed me, and vice versa. And I think it's critical for leaders to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that's what C-suite is doing, is bringing those leaders together that are all kind of on the same mission to not only, grow their business, but to help others grow. It's more of that, collaborative approach, right?
Yeah.
And knowing that you have a trusted source or resource that you can bring your clients to, or bring that person into the equation to help, accomplish a goal, overcome a challenge, whatever that looks like. So love what C-Suite Network represents. That's why I love being a part of it, but love being a part of the Hero Club. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a
cool.
well,
I
it's a
mean,
good, it's a good group, and all of our groups are that way. Even our podcast, we have 600 podcasts today, and that'll be about 2,000 by the end of next year, and then 100 TV shows, which will be about 400 or 500 before we're done. Now, a lot of people call podcast TV, and I get it, but there is a difference between the two. But we talk about audio versus video,
right.
but they can be the same in terms of shows. They're still shows, but yeah, we have all kinds of different. I call them apples on the tree. We're kind of like a giant sequoia tree. And on this giant sequoia tree are all these branches, or you could say apples on the tree, and we just have a lot of them, and that's just what makes us so strong.
Right. Right. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So you already answered my next question. You had talked initially about the isolation aspect and why it was, such a risk for high level leaders, and, how we can combat it. I think, we've covered that pretty well
Yeah.
in our course of conversation here. So here's the overall, since we are legacy engineered, I've got to ask you the legacy question. When it's all said and done, beyond titles, companies, accolades, what does your legacy look like, and how do you want to be remembered by the people you've impacted?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I got a note the other day from somebody who had something very bad happen to them years ago. They had a stroke, and he was a great leader. He was doing a good business, had a stroke, and as he lay in bed and couldn't get back the way he was, and he was now wheelchair, and this was happening, and he actually contemplated suicide.
Hmm.
And then he read one of my books, and then listened to my audio. He listened to the audio book then, after he read it, and then he started following me. And anyway, we became friends, and he decided that he didn't want to end his life. And so that, I mean, when you think about a legacy, that's an unbelievable legacy, and it's always great to have those kinds of things. My goal is to do a little bit of education, motivation, inspiration, and hopefully help somebody with monetization. That's where I would like to see my legacy on the business side. But if you go back to Stephen Covey and go back to Seven Habits of Highly Successful
Hmm.
People.
Always refer to
Yeah,
that.
and in that book, he said you have to have four things. You have to have your business, you have to have your spiritual side, you have to have your friends, you have to have your family. I'd add one more to those today. I think we're much more in tune with it, and that's our health. So I'd say
Mhm.
there's five things that we need. And so I
Yes.
want to say in those things, those areas, those branches, those points of light for each of us was what might be my legacy in each. And I got to tell you, the one that intrigues me the most is just being a good grandfather, being a good, hopefully a good father, hopefully a good husband. And like most things, I think we could look back and say I could have done it better, right?
Right,
But
right.
my goal is to try. I think you don't do it as good with your spouse, and then you do it better with your kids, but you do a lot better with your grandkids. So, and I
I
think the
can
same
attest
thing.
to that.
Yeah. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to business. Now, your first business, you didn't quite know what it was. Your second, your third, fourth, and luckily I bought and sold over 250 in my career for billions of dollars. So I've gotten at some of that straight. Now I still mess up, still don't do it right. But I look at also, Scott, I think were you with us in Crazy Horse at all?
I was not able to make that trip,
Well,
unfortunately.
you'll have a chance to do it again because I just got back from there last night and spent some time on figuring out how we do it in bigger level. And so my thing is all now about scale and how can I grab scale at a great and help people with scale, and then so they can all leave their legacies. And so
Right.
most of my focus today is how do I help build what others are trying to do so that they can do it better. And that becomes my legacy. And so, I sit there and think about if anybody and all of you are listening or watching today about Crazy Horse Memorial, which is this huge mountain in the middle of the Black Hills. And it's a monument to Crazy Horse, the Native American First Nation leader. And it's so big that Mount Rushmore could actually fit under his arm. It's that big. It's
Oh,
massive
wow.
stuff. They're in year 78 of a 150-year-old startup. So imagine if you were the person who started that carving, Korshak, who was the original carver back in 1943 or 1948, somewhere in that range, and he started carving on that mountain, knowing that he is going to die before he sees it finished, and knowing that his children are going to die before they see it finished, and possibly his grandchildren, and maybe even his great grandchildren, as they carry out the legacy of the scale of which he's building on that mountain. That's amazing to me. And so,
Right.
how could you have that vision? How could you have that foresight? How could you have that energy to be and commitment to do that? I hope I live any portion of that. And so you'll get a chance to see it along with a lot of other people when we go back up there this in the fall of 2026 again. So we're going to make that a regular part because it's just such a story.
Yeah, I've got to see that. I've actually even never even seen Mount Rushmore. So
Get
that's
to do
South
both.
Dakota. South Dakota is one of the states that I haven't been to out of all the states and places that I go to speak. South Dakota's not one of them. So
Well, I'm glad you
I
say if you're going to save one for last, that's the best for last because the
the
other states
best
just don't compare. They just don't
there.
compare. But I'm a big cheerleader for South Dakota, and certainly the Black Hills. That's where I grew up, and in fact, I even had my high school baccalaureate at the base of Mount Rushmore with that lit up behind me as I gave my student body president speech way back. I don't want to tell you how many years ago, but yeah. But that mountain's not changed since then. Some of the other things around it have changed, and certainly the facilities and so forth. But it's a beautiful place. We had I know 100 CEOs up there a couple months ago, and I can't wait to take it back.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to hitting that one. That is for sure. Well, cool. Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for joining us today, for sharing your insights, candor, and leadership wisdom. Conversations like this remind us that true success isn't just about building a profitable company, it's about building something that endures. So, to everyone listening today, if today's episode sparked questions about how your business is structured, how protected it truly is, or how intentional your long term strategy really is, we'd love to help. Visit www.controllersltd.com to schedule your complimentary consultation with my team. Together, we'll help you engineer the right structure, reduce unnecessary risk, and design a strategy that supports not just your business, but your legacy. So, again, we're Legacy Engineered, where we're always talking about engineering legacies that last. Jeff, again, I want to thank you.
Well, thank you. And also being a walking example of living your legacy and using like even the podcasting to be able to tell the story. Today businesses have to be content machines. You have to be able to get the story out there about what you do and how you do it. And podcasting is a great way of doing it. You're doing a super job. So keep it up.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Well, you have yourself a great rest of the day. Have an awesome week. And I look forward to seeing you not only in Scottsdale, but also in San Juan.
My pleasure. Yeah, we get to do cruise. We get to go from the desert to the cruise or cruise from the desert. I'm not sure, but it's going to be a blast.
I'm looking forward to that as well.
Thanks for listening to Legacy Engineered. For more episodes and to connect with Scott and the team at Controllers Limited, visit controllersltd.com. You can also follow Scott on Instagram and LinkedIn and start building your legacy with confidence today.